My name is Celeste Morrison. I'm 28 and 3 months ago I discovered that choosing myself over toxic family loyalty would lead to the most satisfying revenge I never planned. It started with a simple family dinner, where my sister Brielle demanded $15,000 for her emergency, and my mother's ultimatum that shattered everything I believed about blood ties. What I uncovered next about their secret financial scheme didn't just destroy our family dynamic, it exposed a betrayal so deep that karma served justice in the most unexpected way possible. Before we dive into this wild family drama, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And if you're ready for a story about family betrayal that'll make your jaw drop, smash that like button and subscribe, because this revenge story has more twists than a pretzel factory. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. Growing up as the middle child in the Morrison family meant I was perpetually caught between my older sister Brielle's drama and my younger brother Marcus's golden child status. Our parents, Linda and Robert Morrison, owned a successful accounting firm in suburban Phoenix, and from the outside we looked like the perfect American family. White picket fence, 2 cars in the driveway, annual vacations to Lake Tahoe, the whole package. But inside our pristine 4-bedroom house, there was an unspoken hierarchy that I never quite understood until that fateful October evening. Brielle, now 31, had always been the princess. Even as adults, she lived in a downtown loft that our parents helped finance, drove a BMW they co-signed for, and somehow managed to float through life without ever facing real consequences for her choices. She'd been married twice, both divorces funded by mom and dad, and had a pattern of creating financial emergencies that the family rallied to solve. Marcus, 25, was pursuing his PhD in engineering at ASU, completely funded by our parents, of course. He lived at home, had his meals prepared, laundry done, and spent his free time gaming, while occasionally gracing us with his presence at family gatherings. The golden child who could do no wrong. Then there was me. I'd moved out at 18, worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, and had been financially independent since graduation. I was a marketing coordinator at a tech startup, lived in a modest apartment, and prided myself on never asking my parents for money. I thought this made me the responsible one, the daughter they could be proud of. How naive I was. The dinner invitation came via text from Mom family meeting Sunday, 6 p.m. Important. No context, no explanation, just the command disguised as an invitation that I'd been conditioned to obey my entire life. I arrived at the family home that Sunday evening with homemade brownies and an optimistic attitude. Maybe they wanted to plan something special for Dad's upcoming 60th birthday, or perhaps they had good news to share. The house smelled like Mom's famous pot roast, and classical music played softly from the living room speakers. Everything seemed normal. Dad greeted me with his usual bear hug, asking about work and my dating life with genuine interest. Marcus barely looked up from his phone, mumbling a hello while remaining glued to whatever game had captured his attention. Mom bustled around the kitchen, her nervous energy palpable as she checked and rechecked dishes that were clearly already perfect. "Where's Brielle?" I asked, noting the empty chair at our formal dining table. "She'll be here," Mom said, her tone carrying an edge I couldn't quite identify. "She's running a bit late." 20 minutes later, Brielle swept through the front door like a hurricane, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors. She looked stunning, as always, perfectly styled blonde hair, flawless makeup, and an outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But there was something different about her demeanor, a desperation hiding behind her usual confidence. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic was absolutely insane. We settled around the dinner table, and for the first few minutes, everything felt normal. Dad shared stories from the office, Mom fussed over everyone's plates, and Marcus actually participated in conversation. I started to relax, thinking maybe this was just a regular family dinner after all. That's when Brielle dropped her bombshell. "So," she said, setting down her fork and looking directly at me, "I need to ask you for something important." The room went quiet, except for the soft ticking of Mom's antique grandfather clock. Even Marcus looked up from his phone. "I'm in a bit of a financial bind." Brielle continued her voice, taking on that sweet manipulative tone I remembered from childhood when she wanted something. "I need $15,000 and I need it within the next 2 weeks." I nearly choked on my pot roast. $15,000, Brielle, what? "It's complicated," she interrupted, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "There was an issue with some investments, and if I don't cover this amount immediately, I'm going to lose everything. My apartment, my car, my credit score, everything I've worked for." I looked around the table expecting to see shock on my parents' faces, but instead found them nodding sympathetically. Marcus had already returned to his phone, apparently uninterested in the financial drama unfolding. "Brielle, I don't have $15,000 just lying around," I said carefully. "That's more than half my annual savings. Can't you ask the bank for a loan? Or maybe Mom and Dad could. We've already helped as much as we can," Dad interjected, his voice firm. "Your mother and I have contributed significantly to resolving this situation, but there's still a gap that needs to be filled." I stared at him in disbelief. "How much have you already given her?" The uncomfortable silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't Brielle's first rodeo, and my parents had been enabling her financial irresponsibility for years, probably decades. "The amount doesn't matter," Mom said quietly. "What matters is that this family takes care of each other. That's what families do, Celeste." The way she said my name with that disappointed tone I'd heard countless times growing up made my stomach clench. It was the same voice she'd used when I'd refused to let Brielle copy my homework in high school, or when I wouldn't cover for her when she snuck out to parties. The voice that made me feel guilty for having boundaries. "I understand that families help each other," I said slowly, "but this is a huge amount of money. I'd have to drain my emergency fund, and I'm still paying off my student loans. Can we maybe work out a payment plan, or—" "There's no time for payment plans," Brielle snapped, her sweet facade cracking. "I need this money now, Celeste. This isn't a request, it's an emergency." The entitlement in her voice made my blood boil, but I tried to keep my composure. This was my family, after all. These were the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. I had no idea I was about to learn just how conditional their love really was. The tension in the dining room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel all eyes on me as I processed what my family was asking, no demanding of me. $15,000 wasn't just money. It was my security, my future, my peace of mind, scraped together through years of sacrifice and careful budgeting. "I need some time to think about this," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Brielle's perfectly contoured face twisted into an expression of indignation. "Think about it, Celeste. This is your sister talking. Your family. What's there to think about? Maybe the fact that it's an enormous amount of money." I shot back, my patience finally fraying. "Brielle, you're asking me to give you more than I make in 4 months. I have my own bills, my own responsibilities." "Oh, please," she scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "You live in that tiny apartment, drive a car from 2015, and never go anywhere or do anything fun. What could you possibly be spending money on?" The casual dismissal of my lifestyle hit like a slap. Here I was, being responsible, living within my means, building a stable future, and she was mocking me for it. But what hurt more was the way my parents nodded along with her assessment, as if my financial prudence was somehow a character flaw. "Just because I don't live beyond my means doesn't mean I'm sitting on piles of cash," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I have student loans I'm trying to save for a house down payment. And yes, I like having an emergency fund, because I learned the value of financial security, apparently, unlike some people." "There's no need for personal attacks," Dad said sharply, but he was looking at me, not Brielle. "Your sister is in genuine trouble, Celeste. This isn't about lifestyle choices, it's about family loyalty." "Family loyalty," I repeated, incredulous. Where was family loyalty when I was working 3 jobs to pay for college? Where was it when I had to choose between buying groceries and paying for textbooks? I never asked you for anything, and now you're all ganging up on me because I'm hesitant to hand over my life savings. Mom set down her water glass with more force than necessary, the crystal making a sharp ping against the wooden table. That's exactly the problem, Celeste. You never ask for help. You've always been so stubborn, so independent. You act like you don't need this family. I act like I don't want to be a financial burden, I corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Mom's voice carried a chill I'd never heard before. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've decided you're better than us. Better than your sister who's made some mistakes but is trying to fix them. Better than your parents who built everything we have from nothing. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. In all my years of working hard, of being responsible, of making sacrifices to stand on my own 2 feet, I had never, not once, thought I was better than my family. If anything, I'd spent most of my life feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I had to prove my worth through achievement and self-sufficiency. That's not fair, Mom, I said, my voice cracking. I've never thought I was better than anyone. I just wanted to be independent. Well, congratulations, Brielle, interrupted her voice dripping with sarcasm. Your independence is really paying off now, isn't it? When your family needs you, you're too selfish to help. Marcus finally looked up from his phone, his expression uncomfortable. Maybe we should just stay out of this, Marcus, Mom snapped. This doesn't concern you. Of course, it didn't concern Marcus. The golden child never had to worry about being asked to sacrifice anything. He just got to sit there playing games on his phone, while the rest of us tore each other apart. I'm not being selfish, I said, standing up from the table. I'm being responsible. There's a difference between helping family and enabling destructive behavior. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of neighbors laughing in their backyard. Normal sounds of a normal evening, but nothing about this felt normal anymore. Dad cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making final decisions. Celeste, your sister needs this money in 2 weeks. We've all discussed it, and we believe $15,000 is a reasonable amount for you to contribute to the Family Emergency Fund. Family Emergency Fund? I laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling it? What we're calling it, Mom said, standing up to face me, is your chance to prove that this family means something to you. That blood is thicker than water. That when push comes to shove, you'll choose us over your precious bank account. The ultimatum hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. I could see it in their faces. They'd already made their decision about what my choice should be. This wasn't a request, or even a demand. This was a test, and they'd already decided what grade I needed to pass. And if I say no, I asked quietly. Mom's face hardened into an expression I'd never seen before. Then maybe you should think very carefully about what kind of relationship you want to have with this family going forward. Brielle leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She knew she'd won. She always won. But as I stood there, looking at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, I felt something shift inside me, a clarity I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I could see the family dynamic for what it really was, and I didn't like what I saw. You know what I said, grabbing my purse from the counter. I do need to think about what kind of relationship I want with this family. As I walked toward the front door, Mom's voice followed me. If you leave here tonight without giving your sister an answer, don't bother coming back until you're ready to do the right thing. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, my heart breaking and hardening simultaneously. I'll be in touch, I said, and walked out into the cool October night, not knowing that I'd just taken the first step toward uncovering the biggest betrayal of my life. The drive home from my parents' house felt surreal, like I was floating through someone else's life. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my reliable Honda Civic, the same car Brielle had mocked earlier, and I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about my family. 28 years of being the responsible daughter, the one who never asked for anything, and this was how they treated me when I hesitated to hand over my life savings. Back in my apartment, I made a cup of tea and sat on my second-hand couch staring at my laptop screen. The rational part of me knew I should probably just pay the money. $15,000 was devastating to my finances, but it wasn't impossible. I could liquidate some investments, drain my emergency fund, maybe take on some freelance work to rebuild. The path of least resistance was right there in front of me, but something about the whole situation felt wrong. Brielle's vague explanation about investment issues didn't add up. My sister had never shown any interest in actual investing. Her idea of financial planning was making sure her credit cards weren't maxed out. And the way my parents had rallied around her, the way they'd already contributed significantly to solving her problem, it all felt rehearsed. Unable to sleep, I found myself doing what any modern person does when they need answers. I started investigating online. I began with Brielle's social media accounts. Her Instagram was a carefully curated highlight reel of her fabulous life designer brunches, expensive spa days, weekend trips to Scottsdale resorts. Her most recent posts showed her at a high-end restaurant just 3 days ago, toasting with champagne that probably cost more than my grocery budget for a week. For someone facing financial ruin, she seemed remarkably carefree. But it was her Facebook that caught my attention. Hidden between the glamorous photos and inspirational quotes were check-ins at places that made my blood run cold. The Bellagio in Las Vegas, Cherokee Casino, Talking Stick Resort Casino. Going back through months of posts, I found a pattern of casino visits that Brielle had never mentioned to the family. My stomach sank as the pieces started falling into place. The investment issues weren't stock market losses or business ventures gone wrong. My sister had a gambling problem. I spent the next few hours deep in research mode, cross-referencing her social media activity with family conversations and memories. The mysterious business trips she'd mentioned over family dinners. The times she'd needed quick cash for car repairs or medical bills. The pattern was there once I knew what to look for. But the real bombshell came when I decided to do something I'd never done before. I looked up my parents' business records. Morrison and Associates Accounting had been my parents' pride and joy for over 2 decades. They'd built it from nothing, working 16-hour days when I was young, sacrificing family time to create a successful practice. I'd always been proud of their accomplishment, the way they'd achieved the American dream through hard work and determination. What I found in the public business filings made me question everything. Over the past 18 months, Morrison and Associates had taken out 3 significant business loans, totaling over $200,000. For an established accounting firm with steady clients, that level of borrowing was unusual, unless they were planning major expansion or dealing with serious cash flow problems. I cross-referenced the loan dates with my memory of family events. The first loan was taken out just 2 weeks after Brielle's second divorce was finalized. The divorce my parents had funded. The second loan coincided with Marcus starting his PhD program. The third loan was dated just 6 weeks ago. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. I needed to talk to someone who could help me make sense of this financial puzzle, someone who understood business finances better than I did. My college roommate Sarah worked as a financial analyst at a major bank. If anyone could help me interpret what I was seeing, it was her. Celeste, it's like 1 a.m., Sarah's groggy voice answered after several rings. I know, I'm sorry, I said, pacing my small living room. But I need help with something, and I didn't know who else to call. 20 minutes later, I'd explained the entire situation to Sarah, the dinner, the ultimatum, and what I'd discovered online. I sent her screenshots of the public filings, and I could hear her intake of breath as she reviewed them. "Oh, honey," she said finally. "This is bad. Really bad." "How bad?" "Based on what you're showing me, your parents' business is in serious financial trouble. Taking out $200 0-inches loans over 18 months, especially for an established firm like theirs, suggests major cash flow problems." And if they've been using business assets to fund personal expenses, that's illegal, isn't it? It's complicated, but it can be. If they're using business credit to pay for Brielle's problems and Marcus's education, they're essentially gambling with their client's trust and their own professional licenses. If this gets out, or if they can't repay these loans, they could lose everything. I felt sick. So when they said they'd already contributed significantly to Brielle's emergency, they probably meant they'd already borrowed against the business to cover her gambling debts. And now they need you to help them dig out of the hole before it gets even deeper. The room was spinning. My responsible, hardworking parents, the people I'd looked up to my entire life, had been systematically destroying their business to enable my sister's gambling addiction. And instead of coming clean about the problem, instead of getting Brielle professional help, they'd decided to emotionally manipulate me into funding their cover-up. Can you believe this is what I discovered just from one sleepless night of digging? The same parents who raised me to be responsible and honest were living a complete lie. But hold on to your seats, because if you think this revelation was shocking, wait until you hear what I found out next. The rabbit hole goes so much deeper than gambling debts and business loans. Sarah, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What happens if I don't give them the money? If their cash flow is as bad as these filings suggest, they'll probably have to default on the loans. That could trigger an investigation into how the money was used, especially if there's evidence they used business credit for personal expenses. At minimum, they'd lose the business. At worst, they could face criminal charges. It's possible. Depending on how much client money they've touched, this could be considered embezzlement or fraud. I thanked Sarah and hung up my mind, reeling. My family wasn't asking me to help Brielle out of a tough spot. They were asking me to be an accessory to covering up what might be criminal financial misconduct. The ultimatum wasn't about family loyalty, it was about keeping me quiet and complicit. For the first time in my life, I understood that I wasn't the problem child for refusing to enable destructive behavior. I was the threat to a house of cards that had been building for years. And I had a choice to make that would determine not just my relationship with my family, but potentially their freedom as well. The responsible daughter in me wanted to save them from themselves. But the woman I was becoming understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. As dawn broke over Phoenix, I made my decision. I wasn't going to pay the money, but I also wasn't going to let them destroy themselves quietly. It was time to force the truth into the light, no matter how much it hurt. Monday morning arrived with a brilliant Arizona sunrise that felt almost mocking given the darkness I'd uncovered about my family. I'd spent the weekend in a strange state of clarity, knowing exactly what I needed to do, but dreading every moment of it. The responsible daughter who had spent 28 years trying to keep the peace was about to declare war. I called in sick to work, a rarity that my boss accepted without question, and spent the morning preparing for what I knew would be the most important conversation of my life. I printed out copies of the business loan documents, created a timeline of Brielle's casino visits, cross-referenced with family emergencies, and wrote down every question I planned to ask. At 2 p.m., I drove to Morrison & Associates Accounting. The office was located in a modest strip mall in Scottsdale, wedged between a nail salon and a tax preparation service that only operated during filing season. I'd visited countless times over the years, proud of the professional space my parents had created. The waiting area had comfortable chairs, recent magazines, and family photos that painted the picture of a successful, happy family business. Now looking at those same photos, I wondered how much of our family's success was built on borrowed money and covered-up problems. Celeste, the receptionist, Mrs. Chen, greeted me with genuine warmth. "How lovely to see you. Are you here to see your parents? Is my mom in?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's in her office. Go right back, dear." I found Mom hunched over her computer, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed client files. For a moment, she looked like the hard-working woman I'd always admired, dedicated, professional, trustworthy. Then she looked up and saw me. "Celeste," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk. If you're here to apologize and discuss Brielle's situation, then yes, we should talk. If you're here to continue being stubborn and selfish, then I'm too busy for dramatics." I closed the office door and sat down across from her desk. The space suddenly felt smaller, more confined, like an interrogation room, instead of the warm family business I'd grown up visiting. "I know about the gambling," I said quietly. Mom's face went very still. "I don't know what you mean." "I know about Brielle's casino visits. I know about the business loans. I know that this isn't the first time you've bailed her out, and I know that you've been using company credit to do it." The color drained from Mom's face, but she maintained her composure. "You don't understand the complexities of running a business, Celeste. Sometimes cash flow requires." "Don't." I held up my hand. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is normal business practice. You've borrowed over $200 0 inches the past year and a half, and I have a pretty good idea where that money went." I pulled out my printed timeline and placed it on her desk. March 2023, Brielle's car repair emergency. Same week she posted photos from the Talking Stick Casino. June 2023. Her medical bills right after a weekend in Vegas. September 2023. The investment opportunity that went bad, which coincidentally happened during her trip to Mesquite. Mom stared at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. How did I figure out that my sister has a gambling addiction and my parents have been enabling it to the point of potentially destroying their business? Maybe because I inherited Dad's analytical mind and your attention to detail. Maybe because I actually pay attention to things instead of just believing whatever convenient lie gets presented. "It's not that simple," Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand what it's like to watch your child destroy themselves. We tried cutting her off, we tried interventions, we tried everything. But she always found a way to get in deeper trouble, and when push came to shove, we couldn't just watch her lose everything. So instead, you decided to risk losing everything yourselves." I leaned forward. "Mom, do you understand what happens if this gets out? If clients discover you've been using business assets to cover personal debts, you could lose your licenses, you could face criminal charges. That's why we need your help," she said desperately. $15,000 would give us enough breathing room to figure out a real solution. We could get Brielle into treatment, restructure the business loans, maybe even tell your father the whole truth about how bad things have gotten. I stared at her. "Dad doesn't know." Mom's silence was answer enough. "Jesus Christ, Mom. You've been lying to Dad too." "I've been protecting him," she snapped, some of her old fire returning. "He works so hard, he's so proud of what we've built." I couldn't bear to tell him that I've been systematically destroying it to save our daughter. "So you decided to destroy it faster, by demanding I become complicit in the cover-up. I decided to ask my other daughter to help save her sister, by enabling her addiction and teaching her that there are no real consequences for her actions." I stood up, pacing the small office. "Mom, can't you see that every time you bail her out, you're making the problem worse? You're not saving Brielle, you're killing her slowly while destroying yourselves in the process." Mom put her head in her hands. For the first time in my life, she looked fragile, defeated. "I don't know what else to do," she whispered. "I can't just abandon my child." "I'm not asking you to abandon her," I said, sitting back down. "I'm asking you to stop abandoning yourselves. And me. And Dad. And Marcus. Brielle isn't the only person in this family who matters. So, what are you suggesting?" I took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting we tell Dad the truth. Today. Then we call a family meeting a real one and we talk about getting Brielle into treatment. We figure out how to restructure the business debt legally and transparently. We stop the lying and the manipulation and the financial cover-ups, and if Brielle refuses treatment, then Brielle faces the consequences of her choices, just like every other adult in the world." Mom was quiet for a long time, staring at the timeline I'd created. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Your father is going to be devastated. Dad is going to be devastated when he finds out you've been lying to him for over a year. He's going to be destroyed if he loses his business and his professional reputation, because we didn't have the courage to tell him the truth. I reached across the desk and took her hand. Mom, I love you. I love this family. But I won't be part of destroying it to enable Brielle's addiction. What if she doesn't get better? What if the treatment doesn't work? Then at least we'll know we tried the right way. And maybe, just maybe, we'll still have a family left to heal together. Mom squeezed my hand, and for the first time in days I saw a glimmer of the woman who had raised me to be strong and honest. Will you help me tell your father? I nodded. We're going to get through this, Mom. But we're going to do it honestly. As we prepared to call Dad into the office, I realized that choosing truth over peace was the most frightening and liberating thing I'd ever done. Dad's reaction to the truth was worse than we'd anticipated, but not in the way I'd expected. When Mom and I sat him down in the conference room and laid out the timeline of business loans, gambling debts, and cover-ups, I'd braced myself for anger, disappointment, maybe even shouting. Instead, what I got was something far more devastating: quiet, profound hurt. He listened without interrupting as Mom tearfully confessed to over a year of deception. He studied my timeline with the same methodical attention he gave tax returns, asking clarifying questions in a voice so calm it was almost eerie. When we finished explaining everything, he sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. How much? He finally asked. How much? What Mom whispered. How much has Brielle actually cost us, total? Not just the business loans, everything. Her divorces, her emergencies, her rent assistance, her car payments. Everything. Mom and I exchanged glances. We'd focused on the immediate crisis, but Dad was asking for the bigger picture. I don't have an exact figure, Mom admitted. Then let's find one. For the next 2 hours we went through financial records with a thoroughness that had made Morrison and Associates successful. Bank statements, credit card bills, business expenses marked as consulting fees that had actually gone to Brielle, personal loans that had never been repaid. The numbers painted a picture that made me sick to my stomach. $347,000, Dad said, finally, his voice hollow. Over the past 5 years, we've given your sister $347,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. That wasn't just money, it was retirement savings, college funds for future grandchildren, security for their golden years. It was the fruits of 30 years of building a business from nothing. And she's still not better, I said quietly. She's still gambling, still lying, still creating emergencies that she expects us to solve. Dad leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 59 years. The worst part is that I knew something was wrong. The business loans felt unnecessary, but your mother said we needed better cash flow. The consulting expenses seemed high, but she handles that side of things. I trusted her. I was trying to protect you, Mom said desperately. You were trying to protect yourself from having to admit that your approach wasn't working, Dad replied. And in the process, you made me an unwitting accomplice to enabling our daughter's addiction. So what do we do now? I asked. Dad was quiet for a moment, then reached for his phone. First, we call Brielle and tell her the truth. All of it. Then we call Marcus and bring him up to speed. Then we figure out how to save what's left of our business and our family. The family meeting that evening was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. We met at Mom and Dad's house, but this time there were no carefully prepared meals or classical music in the background. This time, we sat in the living room with a stack of financial documents between us, and finally talked honestly about our family's dysfunction. Brielle arrived in full defensive mode, clearly expecting another guilt trip about my refusal to hand over $15,000. She wasn't prepared for Dad to methodically walk through 5 years of financial records showing exactly how much her gambling had cost the family. This is insane, she said when he finished. You're acting like I held a gun to your heads and forced you to give me money. You offered to help. We offered to help you get back on your feet. Dad replied calmly. We didn't offer to fund a gambling addiction that you've consistently lied about. I don't have a gambling addiction, Brielle shot back. I have bad luck, and I have a family that's supposed to support me through tough times. Marcus, who had been unusually quiet throughout the whole presentation, finally spoke up. Brielle, you posted Instagram stories from the Bellagio 3 days ago. While you were telling us you were about to lose your apartment, that was a work event, she said quickly. Working in the casino, I asked. Because your location tags tell a pretty clear story about how you spend your time. For the first time since I'd known her, Brielle seemed to realize that her usual tactics weren't working. We weren't buying her excuses, we weren't backing down from uncomfortable truths, and we weren't rushing to solve her problems for her. You want to know the truth? She said, her voice rising. Fine. Yes, I gamble. Yes, I've had some bad streaks. But I'm not some degenerate addict sitting in a casino all day. I'm a successful woman who sometimes makes investments that don't pay off. Gambling isn't investing, Dad said quietly. And losing $347,000 of other people's money isn't a bad streak. It's a serious problem that requires professional help. I don't need professional help. I need my family to stop judging me and start supporting me. We have been supporting you, Mom said, to the point where we've jeopardized our own financial security. So this is my fault. The fact that your business is struggling is my fault. The fact that our business is struggling because we used business credit to cover your gambling debts is absolutely your fault, Dad said, his patience finally fraying. And the fact that you can't even acknowledge that tells me everything I need to know about whether you're ready to get better. Brielle stood up, grabbing her designer purse. You know what? I don't need this. I don't need a family that's going to sit around blaming me for their problems. I'll figure out my own solution. Brielle, wait, Mom called out as she headed for the door. No, Dad said firmly, let her go. We listened to her heels clicking across the hardwood, heard her car start in the driveway, watched her headlights disappear down the street. For the first time in years, we'd set a boundary with Brielle and she'd chosen to walk away rather than face the consequences of her actions. Is this the right thing, Mom asked, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if it's right, Dad admitted. But I know that what we were doing before was wrong. Marcus cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think you guys did the right thing tonight. Brielle needed to hear the truth, even if she wasn't ready to accept it. I looked around at my family, broken, financially, devastated, but finally honest with each other for the first time in years. It wasn't the happy ending I'd hoped for, but it felt like the beginning of something real. What I didn't know was that Brielle's dramatic exit was just the opening act. The real drama was about to begin. 2 weeks after our family confrontation, I thought we'd reached some kind of resolution. Dad and Mom were working with a financial advisor to restructure the business debt. Marcus had surprisingly stepped up to help with administrative tasks at the office, and I'd started sleeping better, knowing that the truth was finally out in the open. Brielle had gone radio silent, which honestly felt like a relief after years of manufactured crises. Then I got the phone call that changed everything. Miss Morrison. This is Detective Sarah Walsh with the Scottsdale Police Department. I'm calling because your name came up in connection with an investigation we're conducting. Would you be available to come in and speak with us today? My blood ran cold. What kind of investigation? I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Could you come to the station this afternoon? The police station was nothing like the ones you see on TV. It was beige and fluorescent and smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaning supplies. Detective Walsh was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor who led me to a small interview room. First, let me assure you that you're not in any trouble, she said, setting down a thick file folder. We're investigating a case of identity theft and credit fraud, and your sister Brielle Morrison is a person of interest. Identity theft, I repeated, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath me. We received a complaint from a local credit union about suspicious activity on several accounts. During our investigation, we discovered that someone had been using your personal information to open credit cards and take out loans. The applications were signed with your sister's handwriting, but they used your social security number, employment information, and financial history. I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what she was telling me. Are you saying Brielle stole my identity? That's what we're trying to determine. According to our records, over the past 18 months, someone using your identity has accumulated approximately $73.0 debt across 6 different financial institutions. The room started spinning. $73,000. Detective Walsh opened the file and showed me copies of credit applications, loan documents, and bank statements. My personal information was scattered across dozens of pages, my social security number, my address, my employment details, but Brielle's signature was on every document. How is this possible? I whispered. How did she get all my information? Family members have access to each other's personal details in ways that strangers don't, the detective explained. Birth dates, social security numbers, mothers' maiden names, things that often get shared casually within families. Your sister was able to use that information to convince lenders that she was you. I thought back over the years of family gatherings, tax seasons, when Dad had helped with our returns, the times Brielle had borrowed my laptop or phone. How many opportunities had she had to memorize or photograph my personal information? The good news, Detective Walsh continued, is that as a victim of identity theft, you won't be responsible for these debts. The bad news is that your credit has been severely damaged and will need your cooperation to pursue charges against your sister. What kind of charges? Identity theft, credit, fraud, potentially multiple counts of each, depending on how many institutions were involved. We're looking at felony charges that could carry significant prison time. I sat in that sterile interview room for another hour, going through documents, signing victim statements, and trying to understand how my own sister had spent a year and a half systematically destroying my financial identity while I was worrying about whether to give her $15,000 in cash. The detective's final revelation was the most devastating of all. Miss Morrison, there's something else you should know. When we arrested your sister this morning, she had your parents with her. They were co-signing for another loan application using your identity. My parents had known what Brielle was doing and had been helping her do it. The drive home was a blur of tears, rage, and disbelief. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I had 17 missed calls from my mother and a dozen text messages ranging from frantic apologies to accusations that I'd betrayed the family by talking to the police. I didn't call her back. Instead, I called Sarah, my financial analyst friend, and told her everything. Holy shit, Celeste, she breathed when I finished. Your own family. That's beyond betrayal. That's criminal. The detective said it could take months to clear my credit. Maybe years. They destroyed my financial reputation while asking me to destroy my savings to bail them out. What are you going to do? I looked around my small apartment, the space Brielle had mocked for being tiny and cheap. The same apartment I'd been able to afford because I'd been careful with money that I now realized they'd been stealing in my name for 18 months. I'm going to let them face the consequences of their choices. The next morning brought a call from Dad. His voice was broken, defeated in a way I'd never heard before. Celeste, we need to talk. Do we? Because I think the police covered everything pretty thoroughly yesterday. Please, give me a chance to explain. Against my better judgment, I met him at a coffee shop near my apartment. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight, his usually perfect appearance rumpled and worn. I didn't know, he said, before I could speak. Not until yesterday. Your mother and Brielle had been doing this behind my back, and when the police called about the loan application, it was the first I'd heard about any of it. You were there, Dad. The detective said you were there when they arrested her. Your mother called me in a panic, said Brielle needed help with paperwork for a legitimate loan. I went to support them, not knowing what they were really doing. His voice cracked. Celeste, I swear to you, if I'd known they were using your identity, I would have stopped it. I wanted to believe him, but trust felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. It doesn't matter anymore, I said quietly. The damage is done. What can I do to fix this? I looked at my father, the man who'd taught me about integrity, honesty, and taking responsibility for your actions, and realized that the best thing he could do was follow his own lessons. You can let the justice system handle it. You can stop enabling Mom and Brielle. And you can accept that some relationships don't survive this level of betrayal. 6 months later, Brielle was sentenced to 3 years in prison for identity theft and fraud. Mom received 2 years of probation for her role in the scheme. Dad divorced her and started over with a new practice, slowly rebuilding the reputation they'd destroyed. Marcus and I maintain a relationship with Dad, but we haven't spoken to Mom or Brielle since the trial. Some people might call that harsh, but I call it protecting myself from people who proved they'd rather destroy me than face their own problems. The most amazing part, my credit is slowly recovering. I've built an even stronger emergency fund, and I've learned that choosing yourself over toxic family dynamics isn't selfish, it's survival. So here's what I want to know from all of you amazing people who've stuck with me through this wild family revenge story. Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and protecting yourself when family loyalty becomes toxic? How do you find the strength to walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives mean the world to me. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own family dynamics, or if it just entertained you for the last 20 minutes, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find these real-life stories about justice, karma, and learning to put yourself first. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because I'll be sharing more stories about family drama, life lessons, and those satisfying moments when the universe finally serves justice. Trust me, if my family taught me anything, it's that truth always finds a way to surface. Finally, share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to protect yourself from toxic family members. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be part of someone's self-destruction. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. Here's to choosing ourselves, setting boundaries, and never apologizing for refusing to enable destructive behavior. You deserve better, and so do I. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, blood may be thicker than water, but respect and honesty are thicker than blood.